So in this lesson, this is where we bring together all of the learning that we've done so far. And what we're going to do is give you some simple strategies to actually work out any chord in any key and hear them on the fly. So far we've looked at hearing the bass notes, so where the bass notes go up and down in different keys, and we've also looked at hearing major and minor chords. Now what we're going to do is go back to our sequence where we identified the notes in the key and then put the chords on top of them so that you'll begin to see a clear and easy to remember pattern. So when we're trying to identify the chords to a song, what we're really doing is taking the knowledge that we've just learnt and putting them into the framework of the notes in the song. Now, often when we think of chords in the song, we think there could be millions of different chords, but really there's only a limited number of choices and possibilities, and it's just trying to work out what the bass notes are and which one of them sound really major or minor, and that is really it. So what we're going to do, we're going to look at the notes in the key and then join the chords to them. Now, how many chords do you think there are in a key given on the amount of notes we actually have? Well, of course, we've got 7 notes in our key, so therefore we've got 7 chords that attach themselves to those bass notes. So let's go back to our piece of paper where we wrote down the notes in different keys, and let's take the first one we looked at. So let's take, say, the key of G. Now, if you remember, the 7 notes we've got are G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp. Those are our 7 notes. And the lovely thing about that, we've just got a sequence of 7 chords that go in the same order in whatever key you have. So what I want you to do, on your piece of paper, above chord number 1, I want you to mark it as a major, so put M-A-J or something like that. Above chords 2 and 3, put minor, so 2 is a minor, 3 is a minor. Above chords 4 and 5, put major. So far we have chord 1 is a major, 2 and 3 are both minor, then you've got a major for 4 and a major for 5. Then for 6, I want you to put minor. Now for 7, it's slightly different, but we'll come to that in a little while. I want you to put diminished in there. But then what I want you to do is put 5/7. And we'll explain that in a little while. So really, we've got 6 chords in the key that are really just major or minor, and then a slightly complicated one, which isn't really that complicated. So have a look at all those chords. Now, think about songs you played in the key of G already. So you're kind of familiar with some of those chords anyway. You've got a G and an E minor and a C and a D. They seem to come up a little bit. B minor maybe comes up sort of less commonly, but you probably played some songs like that, maybe A minor, something like that. So can you see how they all fall into place? And the nice thing is that applies to every key that we've done notes for. So every major key has exactly the same sequence of chords. So see if you can work this through with me. So what's chord 1 in the key of G? It's G. Chord 4 in the key of G is a C. Let's look at the key of E. What's chord 5? That's a B or a B major. What's chord 2? That's an F sharp minor. What's chord 6? C sharp minor. What about the key of C? What's chord 2? D minor. What's chord 6? A minor. What's chord 4? That's F. So in every key, suddenly you've got all the majors and minors that actually work there.
So the only chord we haven't dealt with yet is the 7 chord. And as Andy said, it's a bit confusing, but it's not that bad actually. So if we take chord 7 as it should be, just using the notes in the key, we end up with what we call a diminished chord. And a diminished chord is 2 minor thirds on top of each other. Here's what it sounds like. And that is my chord 7 in the key of G. Now, it's a chord which is not very common in worship music or pop music generally. So actually, instead of that chord, what we tend to have is a chord 5 with the note 7 in the bass. So if I play my chord 5 in the key of G, that's a D chord, and then I put an F sharp, so the note 7 in the bass, I have a much nicer sounding chord, which is why it tends to be used. So instead of a chord 7, we have chord 5 over note 7, or a 5 over 7. We can also find that the same thing is done with chord 3. Sometimes instead of having a chord 3, we'll find that we have a 1 chord over a 3 bass note. So again in the key of G, here's my home chord. If I go to 3, it sounds like this. Actually, it's a perfectly natural chord to our ears. It's just a B minor chord. But more often than not, when we hear that B note in the bass, we'll actually hear chord 1 over the top of it. Those are two very frequent substitutions, the 5 over 7 and the 1 over 3. And if you get the hang of hearing those, that will help you along the way. So let's just see what that sounds like in context, because that's the next stage for us, really. So the 5 over 7 chord gets used a lot after a 1. So if I play a 1 chord, and then I might go to 5 over 7 before I go to chord 6, and that gives me a nice smooth movement with the bass. So that's where you're likely to hear that chord, in a 1, 5 over 7, and it could go to different places, but often to 6. In the same way, your 1 over 3 chord is just a movement towards somewhere else generally. So again, if I have a chord 1 here, and then I go to 1 over 3, I'll often go towards 4. So this sequence, the 1, 1 over 3, and then 4, is very common. And that's how those chords work in context. And we'll move on to see how chords fit together. But knowing these kind of stock patterns can really help you to listen out for what may be coming, because you know what's likely.
So as we start to play through sequences at the moment, it's really important that you identify and remember which chords are in which kind of keys. And the way that we often do that is just to think of the number of the chord in the key. So just as we looked at the key of C, and C being 1, and F being 4, and G being 5, that kind of thing, we've got a bunch of tests that will help you to identify and remember those numbers. So take a good look at your chart, then take the test, see what you get right, see what you get wrong, and if necessary, go over it again.